Vladimir Komarov. On April 23, 1967, Vladimir Komarov knew he was going to die. He refused to back out anyway. Because if he backed out, his best friend, Yuri Gagarin, would take his place. The CIA listened in as he fell. Soyuz 1 had 203 documented design flaws before launch.
Oops.
Soviet engineers had written formal reports listing structural failures, sensor problems, and parachute concerns. The documents went up the chain and went quiet. The launch was tied to Communist Party celebrations and would not be postponed. Both Komarov and Gagarin knew what the spacecraft was. Gagarin had pushed to be assigned as primary pilot, reasoning that the Soviets could not afford to lose their greatest hero, and the mission would have to be made safe. The decision stayed with Komarov. One engineer, Veniamin Rusayev, met with him privately before the launch and begged him to refuse. Komarov told him there was nothing to be done. He boards in the early hours of April 23rd. He is 40 years old. Within the first orbit, the solar panels fail to deploy. The spacecraft begins to tumble. Ground controllers spin 26 orbits attempting corrections. None of them work. On re-entry, the main parachute tangles in its housing. The backup deploys and tangles with the main. Komarov is falling at close to 90 miles per hour. CIA monitoring stations in Turkey pick up his transmissions. Their recordings, declassified decades later, capture a man weeping and cursing the people who built his spacecraft. Soviet operators patch through his wife, Valentina. He tells her to be strong. He tells her what to say to their children. She is also weeping. He gives her instructions for the bank account. Then he says what he thinks of the engineers who signed off on the launch. The Soyuz hits a field in Orenburg Oblast. The retro rockets fire on impact and ignite the wreckage. What is recovered is barely recognizable. The Soviets hold an open casket funeral and publish the photograph. It is a political statement. Gagarin dies in a plane crash 11 months later. The cause is never officially explained. Valentin Bondarenko. 26 days before Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space, the Soviet Union burned a 24-year-old alive in a pressure chamber. They kept it secret for 26 years. Valentin Bondarenko was the youngest cosmonaut in the Soviet training program, selected in 1960. On March 23, 1961, he was 10 days into an isolation endurance test inside a sealed pressure chamber flooded with pure oxygen to simulate space conditions. Medical sensors covered his body. For 10 days, everything had proceeded normally. Near the end of the test, Bondarenko removes the sensors and cleans the attachment sites with cotton wool soaked in alcohol. He throws the used swabs away without checking where they land. One lands on a hot plate. In a pure oxygen environment, the fire is instantaneous. Bondarenko tries to pat the flames out with his hands. The chamber door cannot be opened immediately. Decompressing the high oxygen environment takes time. He burns for several minutes before personnel can reach him. He dies 8 hours later in a Moscow hospital. He is 24 years old. The Soviet Union classifies his death immediately. His name is removed from cosmonaut training documents. His photograph disappears from official group photos of the first cosmonaut class. His family is told to stay quiet. On January 27, 1967, 6 years later, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee die in a fire inside the Apollo 1 capsule. A pure oxygen environment, a sealed hatch, an accidental spark. NASA engineers work through the aftermath with no knowledge of Bondarenko. They spend months investigating what a spark does in a sealed oxygen environment, what concentration accelerates combustion, how fast a crew can die. I mean, the Soviet Union has known the answers since 1961. They say nothing. Apollo 1. Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were running a routine test on Launch Pad 34 at Cape Canaveral. No fuel, no live propulsion systems, The rocket was not loaded. It was a communications check, the most low-risk activity on the entire pre-launch schedule. It was January 27th, 1967. Grissom had been complaining about the capsule for months. The communication systems cut out constantly. Shortly before the test, he had hung a lemon on the hatch of the training simulator. "How are we going to get to the moon," he said, "if we can't talk between 2 or 3 buildings?" NASA managers had logged the complaints. The capsule had over 200 open engineering non-conformance reports. The test proceeded. The capsule is pressurized with pure oxygen at slightly above sea level pressure, standard protocol for ground testing. At 6:31 p.m., sensors register a voltage surge. Grissom's voice comes over the intercom. "Fire!" Then, "We've got a fire in the cockpit." Then Chaffee. "We've got a bad fire. Let's get out. We're burning up." The hatch opens inward. Under the increased pressure of the fire, it is physically impossible to open from inside. The 3 men try. The internal temperature exceeds 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit in 17 seconds. Ground crews cannot open the outer hatch for 5 minutes. The investigation afterwards identifies over 20,000 engineering changes needed across the Apollo program. Yeah, 20,000. The pure oxygen ground test protocol that kills all 3 men is not changed until after the investigation. It had been classified as acceptable. Grissom had been saying it was not acceptable for months. His flight director had told him directly, "It will fly." 3 months after Apollo 1, Soyuz 1 falls out of the sky with Vladimir Komarov inside it. 2 spacecraft, 2 crews, the same year. Nobody in either program tells the other what happened. Challenger. The Challenger did not explode. That is what most people believe, and it is not what happened. On January 28, 1986, 73 seconds after launch, the external fuel tank failed and the shuttle broke apart at altitude. But the crew cabin separated intact. It did not explode. It tumbled. 3 of the 7 crew members activated their emergency oxygen supply packs after the breakup. The personal egress air packs must be manually activated. They cannot activate by themselves. This was established during the post-accident investigation. Krista McAuliffe, Gregory Jarvis, Judith Resnick, Francis Scobie, Ronald McNair, Michael Smith, Ellison Onizuka. At least 3 of them were conscious and functioning after the world assumed they were gone. The crew cabin fell for 2 minutes and 45 seconds before hitting the Atlantic Ocean at approximately 200 miles per hour. Roger Boisjoly had predicted this, not metaphorically, in precise technical terms. On July 31, 1985, 6 months before the launch, he had written a memo to his superiors at Fiacol, the contractor responsible for the solid rocket boosters. He described the O-ring seals. He described what cold temperatures did to their elasticity. He described what would happen if they failed during flight. He used the words catastrophic failure. The morning of January 28th, the temperature at the launch pad is 28 degrees Fahrenheit, well below any temperature at which the O-rings had ever been tested. Fiacol engineers hold an emergency teleconference the night before and recommend delaying the launch. NASA managers push back. Fiacol management overrule their own engineers. Boisjoly watches the launch from the control room. He knows what he is seeing when it happens. After the investigation, he testifies honestly about what occurred at Fiacol. He is removed from the investigation team. He never works in the aerospace industry again. He spends the rest of his life speaking about engineering ethics at universities. He dies in 2012. He is not mentioned on the Challenger Memorial. Sergei Vozovikov. Sergei Vozovikov drowned on July 11, 1993, during a training exercise in the Black Sea near Sochi. That sentence is almost everything that has ever been officially stated about his death. Because the Russian Space Agency, the direct successor to the program that buried Bondarenko for 26 years, decided it had not happened. Vozovikov was a cosmonaut candidate with the Russian Federal Space Agency. Sea survival training is standard for cosmonauts. You may land in water, you need to know how to stay alive. On July 11th, during an open water exercise, he drowns. Strong currents, some accounts say. Equipment failure, others suggest. The Russian Space Agency has never clarified which. His body is recovered, there is no official statement. His name is not added to the list of cosmonauts who died in training. There is no ceremony, no flag, no press release. Researchers who spend years reconstructing the casualty records of both the Soviet and Russian space programs find him in administrative documents, not in commemorations. The memorial wall at Star City, Russia's cosmonaut training facility, does not include his name. What makes Vozovikov different from everyone else in this video is what is absent. No investigation board, no Senate hearing, no released recordings, no open casket, no congressional inquiry, no reformed safety protocol. Just a man who goes into the water during a training exercise and comes out dead, and an institution that files the paperwork and moves on. Columbia. On January 16, 2003, 82 seconds after launch, a piece of foam insulation broke from Columbia's external tank and struck the leading edge of the left wing. It was filmed. The impact was visible in the launch footage. 3 separate teams of NASA engineers flagged it as a potential structural concern and formally requested satellite or spy plane imagery to assess the damage. NASA managers denied the request. They determined, without obtaining any imagery, that the foam strike posed no safety risk. An engineer named Rodney Rocha sent an internal email that was later read into the congressional record. In my humble technical opinion, this is not the last communication I expect to have on this subject. He was right. The crew, Rick Husband, William McCool, Michael Anderson, Elon Ramon, Kalpana Chawla, David Brown, and Laurel Clark, had no knowledge of the concern. They ran experiments. They called their families. They had 16 days. On February 1st, 2003, during re-entry, plasma enters the damaged wing through the breach left by the foam strike. Temperature sensors in the left wing begin failing one by one. Mission Control logs the anomalies. The crew is not told. At 8:59 a.m. Central Time, the last communication from Columbia ends in the middle of a sentence. The voice of Commander Husband. And, the signal disappears. Debris scatters across Texas and Louisiana over a corridor of 400 miles. Evidence recovered from the crew cabin indicates that some members survived the initial breakup. They were alive for up to 40 seconds after Columbia came apart. They were conscious. They knew. The Columbia Accident Investigation Board later establishes that foam strikes had been observed on previous shuttle missions. Every time, they had been classified as acceptable. The board's report uses the word missed 11 times. No NASA manager who dismissed the engineering requests is disciplined.